Lorraine, how did we meet?
Oh, I probably messaged you first. Yeah, surely that's how.
So on the
Because
internet.
I was following your social media, and um, we were in the situation with our son Connor, trying to figure out something that could work for him. And I knew that you had experienced a lot with Jude, and I'm sure I reached out to you to ask you for some type of advice. And then I remember you were just like, okay, we're starting this parent group. I'm adding you to this group chat. And, that was when we were in, what app did you use originally
Oh,
when we were
yeah.
doing like
Group Me,
group
maybe?
text?
Was it
Yeah,
Group
yeah,
Me?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you hadn't started the Facebook group yet. But anyway, I was like, oh, this is exactly what I need.
Oh,
So,
good.
yeah.
I'm glad it wasn't overwhelming. Do you remember, did you come across a reel, or how did you come across, what kind of a post was it? Was it just like a picture and words, or a
I
video?
think it's actually, I'm trying to remember back. I think that a friend of mine tagged you in one of my posts, maybe. Or maybe I had posted something in a private group on Facebook asking for advice. And then I think you got tagged in that thread. And so I had not seen anything of yours before that. And then I clicked that, because you were tagged, and then was like, oh, this is perfect. This is extremely helpful.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Where were you in the process of trying to find care for Connor at that point whenever we met?
We had not started the official process for SSLC placement. It had been like 2 years of trying to find a nurse because he was having the medical needs plus the behavioral needs. He already had the HCS waiver. So we had attendance for him, but we couldn't keep attendance for him in our home because they would quit because of his behaviors and the medical side of things. It was just too much. So we had been working with our local LIDA, trying to find either host home, HCS host home, or group home, or any other possible placement that would take Connor with that combination of needs that he had. They had been unsuccessful in finding anything. I had already contacted myself like over 50 HCS agencies to try to find somebody to take him, with no luck. Sorry, let me take a drink.
Mm-hmm. Which they're not supposed to technically turn you down. They're supposed to take all people.
Right.
But
yes.
I actually don't really like that rule, because I'm just thinking, well, if we're going to force people to take, someone with an intellectual disability with high needs, and they're not capable of taking care of them, I mean, that doesn't really seem like what's best for that individual, before not giving people, the option to say we're not equipped. I don't necessarily agree with that. You have to take them thing. I mean, as much as we need help, we want the right help.
Right. Definitely. Sorry, I've got this little tickle in my throat. Yes. So I appreciated that the various agencies that I spoke with were very forthcoming about that, because the LIDA had shared that they couldn't deny us, the HCS agencies were not allowed to deny us. But as you just said, is that actually like the safest practice for these kids or for anyone, it doesn't have to be a kid, an adult too, but who have more profound needs. And then as I started researching, I was realizing, oh my goodness, these, like the group homes, it's $10 an hour for the people who are going to be taking care of our son. And I couldn't keep people in our house for $20 an hour.
Yeah.
And so I realized that's just not an option. So I had already inquired about SSLC placement, And Arletta originally was not in favor of that. And that's when I got connected with you and with the parent group and started kind of being more educated. And then just kind of pressed on with the Lita and said, this is what is happening. And so
Yeah.
I just need your support to make this happen because it's the only option. I had already called tons of private placement, really kind of more inpatient.
Short term.
Yeah. And Connor had been on the wait list for Nexus, the one in Houston. He had been on their wait list. And for a variety of reasons, it just never went through. And that was still going to be short term placement. We'd looked out of state, and every place that I called had the same answer. We can't accept his medical because he is a risk to the other medically fragile patients with his behaviors. Or we can accept his behaviors, but we can't accept the medical because we don't have nursing to cover him 24/7. So it was always the same exact hurdle that we were hitting there of nobody will accept these. And we knew that the SSLC had to accept that combination, that there was not an option to deny him.
Why do you think that your LITA was not supportive of, seeking placement at the SSLC?
I think initially, I found out they had never done, or at least the current leadership at that time had never done an SSLC admission for a minor. And I think initially they were also thinking he has the HCS waiver. We can come up with better options than that most restrictive environment. And so I think they wanted to have the evidence that these other less restrictive environments were not going to work for Connor before they decided to move forward.
Yeah. I have a theory that may not be very fair, but I feel like maybe the closer you get to Austin, that the more people you run into that are anti-SSLC. That's kind of what I'm picking up on. Because I know that I think it's called TDCC, the Texas, or is it TDDC? Anyway, I'm still learning so much, but I've heard that some of these advocacy groups that are down in Austin are, they're not just outright, against them, but they really are, I don't know, they are not 100% for them. So I just wonder if there's more of that influence there because, like, you and I both know that the culture changes throughout Texas in different parts that were huge. East Texas may be a little bit more on the conservative side, and we had zero pushback at all. Of course, we went through the whole process that you went through, or we exhausted the in-home help and, called the different group homes and were told, no, we can't handle. And they were, I don't know, it's just a thought of mine. I just wonder if there's less of an openness or a different perspective about the SSLCs. Because I know, I'd have to go back and do my research on the history of this, but it was maybe a few years ago, they were trying to shut the SSLCs down. And people from, I think, I don't know if it was just from Austin or other areas, they were coming on the campuses at the SSLCs and kind of protesting and telling residents that they could leave, that it was their human right to leave. But not giving them where are you going to go, and not following through to get them to where they need to be safe. And I don't know, the SSLC, I have a very bittersweet relationship with in my heart. Obviously, you don't wake up one day and go, it's my heart's desire and my dream to take my child to a state-supported living center. But when you're in a situation like you and I have been in, it becomes a life raft to you to keep your child safe, to keep your family sanity, and safe. And I have found it to be a true rescue for us. Is it something that I just go on and on about how wonderful it is? No, but I'm grateful. So I have, these mixed emotions about it. But I personally see the great need for it. I wish the state wasn't the only entity that offered it for these higher needs individuals. I mean, we have these great intentional communities out there that are privately run, but they're not equipped like state supported living centers are to handle behavioral. And then on top of that, medical, like that, my heart really goes out to you in that it's like, I'm in a fringe group because of the behaviors, and you're in a fringe of a fringe because of the medical. And it's just like, and of course, you're going to get into this, but you even were turned down by the SSLCs, which was a major blow to you. And I'll never forget when you sent that Marco Polo to our group, and you were I think you were like golfing with your husband, and you were just in shock because that was supposed to be the last resort. Okay, well, we always have that to fall back on, the SSLC. They can't turn us down. Like, the state won't fail us, And then if you want to pick it up from here, you sent this message to us after you guys did the court commitment. You're thinking everything's going great, and you're going to get the word on where he's going, and then what happens?
Yeah. So I'll kind of back up from there when you were talking about, some of the privately run and nonprofit centered facilities, that offer this residential care to people who have intellectual disabilities, and how some of those are so fabulous, and they just are not able to accept kids like our Connor or your Jude. And so we had been really hopeful at that when we were looking at places like that, if we can just offer enough money, privately, if we can talk them into this or whatever, So I was kind of just wanting to touch on that just a little bit, because you had just mentioned that about, these privately run facilities. And that was our greatest heart's desire, was like, we felt like we could feel better about placing Connor outside of our home if we knew that he was in, our heart's desire was to be in a Christian facility. He came from a facility, he was adopted from Ukraine, where he was severely abused and neglected and malnourished, and every form of abuse that you can't actually even fathom this level of abuse. So it was a huge concern of ours for him to leave our home and for us to entrust someone else to take care of him. So our hope really was that we could find a private facility, but we realized there's not a single facility in the state of Texas, nor really in all the other states that we contacted, that was set up to take a kid who has behavioral needs. Is the first one. They usually don't take behavioral kids, and then that medical need. So I've already talked about that combination. So when I was like, okay, SSLC is our only option, and the state cannot deny him, they have to provide for him, we were really also kind of devastated that that was the only option, because we felt like we were going to be returning him to a similar situation that we felt like we had kind of rescued him from.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we had gone through all those steps, and we had gone to court and had our son, committed to this state supported living center. And we were just waiting on that placement. And I was told that he would be going to the one in Lufkin. No, is it Lufkin?
Yeah, that's where Jude is.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I was originally told.
Okay.
Yes. And just to be waiting to hear from them. And then when I heard from them, of course, I was calling every day because I was wanting to know, where's he going? When's he going? And then Lufkin said, we can't accept him because we don't feel that we can safely meet his needs. again, due to medical and behavioral combination. And so, yeah, I was devastated because I was like, this is the last resort. This is the only option.
Yeah, because only 3 in Texas, there's like 13, I think, in Texas, and only 3 will take minors. So then there goes one.
Yes,
One's
exactly.
down.
And no idea that they could actually deny. And I think the way that they're able to do that is by saying that they can't safely meet his needs. So if they are incorporating the safety of the child, then they can send that back to the state and say, we can't safely meet this child's needs. So then his file got sent over to Brenham and Abilene are the other two that accept minors. Brenham got back with me right away that they would not be able to safely meet his needs. So I was really hoping that Abilene would say yes, because I kept thinking if they don't, ooh, what are we going to do? Like, there's literally no option for him anywhere in the USA,
Yeah.
So Abilene called and said that they had denied him as well due to not being able to safely meet his needs. Their reasonings were the same as what all of these private facilities were, that his medical needs, he needed to be in their medically fragile unit to meet his medical needs, but he was a risk to the other residents due to his behaviors. And he would not fit well in the behavioral wing because they wouldn't have the 24/7 nursing available to him. So I was just completely devastated. And at that point, you had given me the email for one of the HHSC. I don't know what his job title was.
He's in my phone as over all the SSLCs. I don't know what his actual title is, but yeah. I'm like, this man's name and then over all the SSLCs. I put that in my phone.
Again, I don't know his title, but I emailed him directly and I just shared the scenario here. And he was very receptive. He was very responsive. And you had said he had helped with some situations you had encountered, and that he did email me on the weekend when he was not at work. He replied to my email. And he said when he got back in on Monday, he would be working on this. And I heard from, he had CC'd some other people on an email and connected me in with that and said, let's figure out what we're going to do with this situation here. And then that same day, I received a phone call from the intake coordinator for the San Antonio SSLC. And I knew they didn't accept minors. So I was confused when the lady called me. And so I was trying to figure out from her, because she was wanting to come do a home visit for Connor to, I guess, assess and see if she felt like they could meet his needs. And in hindsight, I'm realizing that, they were contacted as kind of the fourth option because 3 had already denied and maybe they would be willing to accept him, and that they were going to make an exception to the rule. They would accept this minor should they decide that they could safely meet his needs. So we were talking about the home visit, and in the process of all of that, they didn't do a home visit. They decided just to accept him. And so a date was set for him to move there. And we were ecstatic, but also extremely nervous about the whole situation. I think one of the things that is kind of different with our story than with a lot of residents in SSLCs. So when you were talking about, having groups wanting to shut down the SSLCs, Connor's placement at the San Antonio SSLC, his QIDP, which I don't even remember what that stands for.
Qualified Intellectual Disability Professional, I think.
Okay, there you go. So
case manager, basically.
She's the one who would be like his case manager. She holds another role at the San Antonio SSLC this was going to be kind of her first QIDP case. She is the one who made the exception to accept Connor. And it just so happens to be that she's also a believer, and orphans and orphan care and James 1:27 to care for orphans and widows in their distress was kind of a life verse for her. And she got Connor's file and felt like God was saying, he is yours. And she's the one who made the exception. And she came on as his QIDP, accepting this minor when there's not a single other minor at the entire facility.
Makes me emotional every time I hear the story.
Yeah.
Wow.
So God's hand, like I remember hearing you say that you prayed for very specific things for Jude when he was at the SSLC, and that you wanted someone to love him like you loved him. And I was praying very specific things with the San Antonio SSLC, not having any information about this QIDP, not having any information about anything about the facility other than, it's government run. So my expectations were really low. And when we got there to move him in, there were just so many kind and caring people who were just coming in, and I felt like he was just being like wrapped up in every part of the prayer coverage that I had asked for, because everyone who came in was so interested in him. And of course he hit and kicked and butted every one of them. And, but nobody shied away from it at all. Nobody even reacted to it. It was just kind of normal. And we did his admission meeting, and that was probably like 2 hours of, sitting and making all the plans of how they were going to meet his needs best. And at the end of that meeting, my husband and I attended the meeting and participated in all of that. And they asked at the end if we had any concerns or remarks or anything else we wanted to share. And my husband said, I just want to, thank each and every one of you, because there were probably at least 20 people in that meeting.
Yes, I've been in those meetings, and they're so intimidating. You just feel like you're on display.
Yes. So there were like so many people in there. But my husband said, I have to thank each of you for being here and for taking on, we're like passing the torch to you to care for our son when we can't anymore. And so we're really grateful for each of you. But I have to say, I went into this is my husband speaking, I went into this expecting the worst. And what I've realized is God has given us his best.
Wow.
And it was like, oh my gosh, like that's so accurate. And it was not something we ever considered would even be a possibility, because we thought if we could just pay enough money for a privately run facility that was a Christian nonprofit or anything along those lines, then we would be more guaranteed for those results. And this is literally, last resort. And it was like, this is the ram in the thicket for us. This is like, and to know that everyone's heart there was for our son and not against him. And then after that meeting, the QIDP shared privately with me, like the story of why she accepted him. I mean, I don't think she would have denied him regardless of that. So it wasn't just, this is the only reason why. But she shared her end of the story. And it was just like God was giving us so much, abundantly more than we could even think to ask. And that felt like such a huge relief, but even more so just like his faithfulness was displayed in so many ways that we never even thought to ask. Like we just were in complete awe of his faithfulness. So hearing, people wanting to shut down SSLCs, they don't know the full story.
Yeah.
And these are not at least for our son's case, like you said earlier too, none of us decide, oh, hey, we just want our kid to go live at an SSLC because it's going to be convenient, you know. No, it comes with a lot of heartache and anguish and prayer, and really it's like we're like sacrificing our child by putting them in this facility that is government run because it's the only option. And to take that away would mean there are no other options for our children. And I think it's easy for people to judge from the outside who aren't walking in those shoes to think there are other options. You know, there's other things that you can do. We did them all.
Yeah.
There's not one stone that didn't get turned over, you know, that we did them all. And people who are judging, I think they oftentimes they're not aware. I have a blood cancer, and that causes chronic fatigue amongst a lot of other things. I was the only person able to care for our son due to his medical needs, which I'm not a nurse, but I learned all of that. I mean, kind of get forced into learning a lot when, you know, you're a special needs parent, you get thrown into things and you learn it. We didn't have any nurses, not one nurse because of the pandemic. Connor required 24/7 overnight care. So if I already have chronic fatigue and I'm the only person who can care for him because of his medical needs, my husband couldn't even do it. His medical needs were too complex. And there were just too many details and too much to do. But I could do that. It just, after like 3 years of doing it, my husband said, like, you're going to die doing this.
Yeah.
One, behaviors. Two,
Exhaustion.
nobody can work 24/7, literal no break ever, overnight care, you're awake.
Even a healthy person, the director of the SSLC, she and I have had several heart-to-heart conversations, and she said, Lainey, no one person can do this.
Mm-hmm.
No one person can do this, not even there. I mean, they have shifts. They just switched from 12-hour shifts to 8-hour shifts. And no one person can do it, and your body does eventually give out in one way or another, whether it's mentally, physically.
Yes, absolutely. And I think Connor's placement at the SSLC, his needs are beyond met. Like, he's got fresh caregivers ready to do whatever it is that Connor wants to do when their shift comes on. They're not coming in exhausted. They're coming in refreshed and ready, and they know that there's an end to their shift, and they get breaks during their shifts as well. And then, you know, others, they cover for each other. So that alone is something that can't happen in our home, even if we had attendants coming in to help care for him. There's just not that level of support that's needed to care for the caregivers.
Right.
To give them
I want to add to that too, because, you know, we get a lot of pushback online from, like you're saying, the people that just don't understand. There's a lot of judgment on the outside. One of the responses I see a lot to our videos is, well, can't you pay to have someone come in the home? Why can't you have, you know, in-home support? Just like as you were talking, it reminded me, it's your responsibility as a parent to schedule everybody. It's your responsibility to make sure that they stay, to oversee them, to pick up a shift if somebody calls in sick, or maybe to supervise them. And that in itself is a weight. It's like, even though you may have it all covered for the week, it's just the anticipation of, are they going to be able to do it? Are they going to come? Is somebody going to be late? Is so-and-so getting burnout? And then that's just another heaviness upon you to have to carry of, like, what do I do if this doesn't work out? And then secondly, there's just the fact of your coexistence under the same roof. Even though you may have support, you're hearing the behaviors, you're seeing the interactions, and that weighs on you mentally. When we did the in-home care, we got to a point to where I was waking up the kids before Jude got up, putting them all in our van, and we just stayed away all day. Because hearing the chairs get knocked over and the screaming, or okay, y'all go get in your room real quick, shut the door, like that's not good either. It's like, okay, yeah, we have the support in home, but actually having a normal life in that environment is pretty much impossible. I've got a friend whose daughter can't even live in the house. So they have another, like a cottage thing behind their house, and she lives in it. And she said, there are days I have to tell my daughter, don't come in the house today. And she said she literally lives right there. And this daughter's a teenager. She's still a child. She said, I'll go sometimes several days without even seeing her. So it's like this notion that, well, can't you just get help inside the house? You don't understand what you're saying when you make that criticism. It's so much more complex than just get somebody to show up and help. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, for sure. And in our case, we've got a lot of kids. So
yeah, how many children do y'all have?
So there's 12 total. One of those passed away in 2010. So there's 11 living. There's just 4 left in our home right now, but 3 of those 4 have significant special needs. So we do have people in our home.
So it's busy in your house.
Yeah. And we're able to staff those kids because they're not as complex. So yes, I do manage all of that, and I do the training and the overseeing and all of that. And we still do have another child in our house who has severe behaviors, but she does not have she has medical complexities, but she doesn't need nursing. And so with all of that, I was already managing a lot.
Yeah.
And then with Connor on top of that, it was like, if we could get attendance to cover him, I still had to do the medical side. I had to do the nursing side.
Yeah.
So it still wasn't feasible for me to still do a 24-hour shift 7 days a week for the medical end of things, even if I had someone to help support the behavioral side for him. So
Let me ask a few questions here. So how many of your children are adopted?
9. And the one who passed away was adopted. So she's included in the 9. So we have 3 biological kids. Well, now they're adults. They are now 24, 26, 28, the biological ones. But our age range, our span, our youngest now is 11, and the oldest is 31. So we have one child who's adopted who's older than our biological kids. So there's a 20-year age gap between and the oldest.
And so when were you diagnosed with your cancer?
2015.
Okay. And were y'all still adopting at that point, or had y'all completed all your adoptions?
We did our last adoption in 2015, in January of 2015. And then I was diagnosed August of 2015.
There's so much to talk about here. Oh my goodness. It's like you do all this work for the Lord, you're wrapping it up, and then bam, you get diagnosed with cancer. I mean, how are you, talk to me about that. Like, how do you psychologically start processing that? What was that for you?
Yes, extremely hard. This kind of came on out of nowhere for us. We had already adopted, 9 kids. We completed 9 adoptions. Most of them are from other countries. We only have one from Texas none are foster children. And I always want to add in here, we don't get any money for any of these kids. Like a lot of people think that people adopt kids with special needs because they're going to make money or like get money. No.
I didn't even know that. I mean, that never once crossed my mind.
Yeah. So sometimes people think it's so that we can make money off of them, like just getting paid by the government. No, we don't get any money for any of the kids. And like most of the international adoption fees, like the minimum amount that a family would spend on an international adoption is like $30,000.
Yeah.
So when people have this judgment of, oh yeah, they just wanted to get paid by the government. Sorry. No, that has nothing to do with it.
No, we're actually paying the government.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, I'm kind of all over the place with trying to give a little bit of background information, but we never even set out to adopt kids. This was all something that God laid on our heart. 2008 was the first adoption. Our biological kids were born in 96, 98, and 2000. So then 2008 is our very first adoption. And we kind of thought that was going to be the completion of our family because we had 3 kids and we had 2 boys and a girl. So that the girl was in the middle. And so the child we adopted in 2008 was also a girl. So we had thought 2 boys, 2 girls. This is how God's completing our family. But God just used that adoption experience to open our eyes to a far greater need than we had any awareness of. That first adoption was in Colombia, and we took our whole family and we stayed there for about a month to complete her adoption. And that's when God just really opened our eyes. So the time frame, 2008 to 2015, over those years, there's a total of 9 kids adopted.
Wow.
And we also had no idea that we would ever be adopting kids who had special needs. None of this was ever anything that was on our hearts until God put it there. And with each child, I felt like God gave us limited information because he wanted our yes. And if he gave us too much information, our yes would be a no, because we would know we can't do that. We can't handle that. We're not enough to do all of those things. And God is always enough, and God is always faithful, and things don't always look the way we would expect them to look, but he's still faithful through it. So that's kind of what happened when I was diagnosed with cancer, of like, oh my goodness, we've got all these kids. We have 4 who have Down syndrome. I was just devastated with how are we going to do this? Because I had always been a stay-at-home mom. I had taught school before our firstborn, but I never went back after our firstborn, and we had homeschooled, and my role in the home was about being the best mom to our kids that I possibly could be. And when I was diagnosed with cancer, it was flipped upside down, because I was like, who's going to be the mom to all these kids? And I guess initially, it was just shock. And then it was like, okay, well, I'll beat this cancer and then I'll be back to normal. And then I'll be the mom that I've always wanted to be to the kids. And then found out that there's not a cure for this type of cancer. And so initially the symptoms that I had, that chronic fatigue, was so severe that it took energy and effort for me to roll over in bed. And I would be exhausted to just roll over, and I'd have to roll because my body was numb from staying in the same spot for so long. But I had to muster up the energy to roll over. So that level of chronic fatigue makes it absolutely impossible to care for children of any ability, much less those who cannot do any of their own care. So during that time is when our kids got their HCS waivers, which brought in attendants to help care for their needs. And that was a whole new learning process. And that was a whole new turning over care to people most of the time that I didn't even know, to trust that they would be caring for our children. But I was in the home, so I could hear and see and correct and those kinds of things, that made me at least feel better about knowing what was actually happening, because they were all in our home. I think God taught me a lot in that season about trusting him, that this diagnosis was not a surprise for him. It was filtered through him. He was sovereign over it. And I had to trust that through that process, he would be refining me to be more like him. And I had to let go of a lot. And so I think for me, it was a lot about just trusting him and his faithfulness, and really opening possibilities of things looking different than what I assumed they would always look like. And so there's been a lot of growth through all of that, and a lot of change within our own home, because at the time, all of our biological children still lived at home as well. They all stepped up into big roles when this happened. And then as they started moving out, then it was like, oh goodness, okay, my built-in security blankets are starting their own adult lives. And so there's been a lot of transition since 2015 to now, of things looking very different than we ever thought. And like Connor moving to this SSLC, did we ever think that that was a part of his future? Absolutely not. When we adopted every one of our children, it came with our intention of being their lifetime caregiver. And should they live longer than us, there were several different plans made. One with biological kids saying, well, we'll take over. We'll take over their care. That's also changed as they become adults and started married lives. And, they're still involved with our children, but plans have changed over the years of what things would look like. And Connor going to this SSLC was like, it was never part of our plan that any of our kids would even move out, that they would all stay here and we would just bring in people to help us care for them. But I think the part that's the most important of all of that is it's all God's faithfulness. So even though it might not look the way we always thought it would look, his faithfulness has never wavered. And his faithfulness provides exceedingly abundantly for each of these children, even if we're not able to do it the way we thought.
Yeah.
Or it's not looking the way we thought. Is it better or worse? And none of it is worse. It's just his faithfulness. It's just different. And so a lot of changes since that cancer diagnosis, but his faithfulness has never changed through all of that.
That's so beautiful. Did you feel supported during all your adoptions? I know we get criticized. That's one of our criticisms is why did you keep having children? Beyond after you knew about the needs of your son. And I'm very, very pro building a family. I don't think that children are ever a bad decision. Even if you're adding them through adoption. And so I 100% support you and your husband's decision. I think what you guys have done is I'll use the word that I heard at Brookwood when we went to their conference. It's sacramental, which I think is so beautiful. It's a holy work that you're doing. You truly are living a life that reflects your belief that this is not all there is. Because if you did, you would be you'd be retired right now, and you'd be traveling and doing all the things that people do that who just have a very short-term perspective about their existence. And but did you get pushback? Did you Did you feel supported? Did you have a church that supported you? Did you have family that supported y'all when you were making these decisions?
Yes, I do feel like we were supported. Back in the day when we first started adopting, there was less social media and more blogs. So we had a blog, and when our daughter Chrissy was going through her open heart surgery, she's the one who passed away. I felt like I had started that blog to update our family just on everything going on with Chrissy. It was easier to just put it all in one place. And this is even before, group texting and other apps, all of that. So it was like, this is the centralized place to put all of this. And her story when she was in the hospital, she was there 31 days, and her story spread far and wide around the world. So with that, I think the more audience that you get, the more opportunity for people who don't see things as a believer and through, kind of God's filter. And so there is that opportunity for people to be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why, not understanding. But for us personally, our kind of support group, our friend group, was very, very supportive of all of this. And we didn't get any, questioning, why are you doing this? That it made sense to everybody. And at that time, adoption was such a huge movement in the Christian community. And so many, many churches were doing, adoption conferences and seminars and supports. And there was a huge, huge movement for all of that. So in our community, our Christian community, it was very well understood. And James 1:27 was our life verse of caring for orphans and widows in their distress. So I felt like we were very supported through all of it. But there still were those, handfuls of people who would have opposite opinions and kind of share their judgment. But I feel like it was a much more controlled setting because really this wasn't even like Facebook was still kind of new then. And there was no Instagram or TikTok or any of that stuff. So I feel like social media makes it so easy for outside people to cast judgment.
Yeah.
Than more during this time when we first started adopting, it was more like in-person friendships and church community and having that type of support than it was social media without knowing these people.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
So you have, out of the 9 that you adopted, did all of them consider to have some sort of special need?
No. The first child we adopted from Colombia did not have special needs. The second one from Serbia, she's the one who had the congenital heart defect. So that technically would be a special need because she had she was missing her pulmonary artery, which isn't compatible with life. And she was 4. She should not have lived for a few days, but she was still alive when she was 4.
Wow.
So that would be considered special need, but we didn't think of it as special needs. And then when she passed away was when kind of my husband and I together were like, goodness gracious, we can do so much more for so many more orphans who people are going to say no to. So that kind of, God used a variety of circumstances to kind of shift our thinking to saying yes to children that most people would say no to. Wow. And so that kind of, there's a long story behind all of that, of how the shift in thinking occurred. But the first 2 that we adopted that had like identifiable special needs were our 2 sons from Ukraine who both had Down syndrome. And so one of those is Connor, who's now in the SSLC.
So he's a twin, you said?
No,
Oh.
they weren't even related to one another.
Oh.
They were in the same room of the same orphanage in Ukraine. But they weren't related to one another. A lot of people do think they're twins. And we named them Cooper and Connor, which also sounds a little bit more likely. But they're not related to one another. But those were our first with, more identifiable special needs. And we had no idea what we were saying yes to.
Yeah.
We were like, oh, yeah, Down syndrome, that'll be fine.
Yeah.
They had, both of them still do have much more significant medical needs. And the Down syndrome is kind of the least of the concerns with, so I forgot what your original question was.
Well, I was just wondering, out of the 9, how many?
There's 6 out of the 9 who have special needs.
So, but you only have 4 at home?
Yes.
Okay, so that leaves one more special needs child. Is that individual living in a group home?
There's 2 who I have not spoken directly about. The 31-year-old, so our eldest child, she is from Haiti. And when we adopted her, no one had any idea that she had special needs. She has a severe intellectual disability.
Okay.
It very much limits her ability to do anything for herself. It's kind of an unknown. We don't know. There's no birth records or medical records. She didn't get medical care in Haiti. When she turned 30, she decided that she wanted to move out. And
so you did not have guardianship over her, obviously.
Right.
Okay.
Right, yeah. But we supported her decision of wanting to move out. But she had seen her siblings who were younger than her move out and start their own lives. And so when she turned 30, she felt like, oh, it's her turn to do the same. And this kind of started us on this journey. I had mentioned earlier, we never thought any of our children with special needs would ever move out, that they would always live at home with us.
Yeah.
So she was kind of that first one who started that shift in thinking of, okay, maybe this is actually something that we need to consider. So she could not live independently. She could not have a driver's license. I mean, she can't operate a microwave or a dishwasher or laundry or any of that. So we knew the only way for her to be able to move out would be to go to a group home, and she does not have the HCS waiver. So
even now, she doesn't have it now. Okay.
She's been on the wait list, but she hasn't come up. And yet our other kids got it with a emergency diversion slot, but not Naomi, because she didn't have any behavior. She's very sweet and easygoing. So anyway, I contacted the LIDA to find out what options we might have. And they told me about the ICF group homes. Just difference in number of people allowed in the home. And so we found an ICF group home in Austin that would accept her, that was a female group home. And I asked Naomi, like, do you want to go visit this? How badly do you want to move out? It's going to be really different from what you're used to. And she was like, I do. I want to go visit. Wow. And we pulled up, and I thought there's no way this girl was going to want to move here, because she has OCD and she likes everything to be extremely clean. So when we went into the group home, it was not extremely clean.
Oh my goodness.
The residents were very sloppy. They weren't cleaning up after themselves. There was stuff everywhere, laundry, dirty laundry, unmade beds, all of that. And that was very stressful for Naomi. Like, in our own home, she wanted everything in its place. Everything had to be perfectly done, perfectly clean, all of these things. So I thought, there's no way after walking into this place that she's going to want to live here. And she did.
Oh my gosh.
I want to live here. And I thought,
that's pretty amazing.
Yes, it really is.
Wow.
I was shocked. Absolutely shocked. So we started that process, and it was not long. It was like less than a month that she was able to move there. And then I thought, okay, she had like a 30-day trial. And I thought, after
She's
her
not going to
30
last.
days, yeah, she's not going to make it. And she did. And she still lives in the exact same group home. And she is thriving. She loves living there. She feels much more independent. And she goes to an adult day hab during the day. So she's still, like, in terms of all that she's able to do independently, not a lot of changes there, but she lives with people who are also adults with intellectual disabilities and has kind of found her community. So she's enjoying that. And then the second one that I haven't talked about is Lily Pearl.
I love her name.
She has Down syndrome. She's from China.
Oh my gosh.
She's 23. And Lily Pearl is what a lot of people would say is very high functioning. She is really smart and very independent and does not see any limitations on her abilities. So she decided, she had graduated from high school from the 18 to 22-year-old program that Texas has. She had done an internship her last year. She was working at a local hospital and thriving, loving it, loving it, loving it. And they loved her. And we expected that Lily Pearl would want to continue working there when she graduated, because it was part of this internship that she was doing her last year of the 18 to 22-year-old program. Well, she kind of threw us all for a loop, because right at graduation, she said, I want to move out.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. And so we were thinking, she saw Naomi move out, and she knew that Naomi did have more limits than what Lily Pearl herself has, and then what her siblings have as well. And Lily Pearl saw Naomi do that and saw her loving it and being successful. And so Lily Pearl was like, okay, I've graduated. Now it's my turn to move out. She still wanted to work. She wanted to get hired and have a job, but she wanted to move out. Well, in our area, there were no group homes in the vicinity to be able to stay working at that hospital. And so I asked her, what's more important to you, moving out or working at the hospital? And she said, moving out.
Wow.
I said, okay, so we'll look for you a group home then. And again, hers would be ICF. She does not have a HCS waiver. So we found a placement for her in San Antonio. So Naomi's in Austin and Lily Pearl's in San Antonio. And Lily Pearl's group home, it's called Covenant Home, but it is an ICF home. And they operate under Mission Road. And it is a Christian nonprofit that also has the government funding for their ICF group homes. And they have their own day hab that they do.
How was their day hab? Are you happy with it?
Oh, yes. It's called the Unicorn Center.
Oh
my gosh. It's fabulous.
I'll have to look it up.
It's Mission Road. If you look up their website, they have been in existence since, like, I think 1960, maybe even earlier than that. And it was started by a family whose son had special needs. I think it's older than 1960. I can't recall. But it has just grown and grown and grown. And Lily Pearl, they call hers, even though it's Covenant Home, they call it the sorority house, because all the girls are like little sorority girls. Like, they are all just very girly girls. And so Lily Pearl loves living there. She goes to the Unicorn Center for the daytime programming, but she still desires to get a job. So she's working with Texas Workforce Solutions to try to find a job. But she's so happy there. And we have asked her multiple times, if she wants to move home. She likes to come visit, but she always wants to go back. And so we always just wanted her to know, if you ever want to come home, you're welcome here. We never want any of our children to feel like this door is not open here. So she is adamant, like, no, I am not moving at home. I am staying here. I like to visit y'all, but I love my life here.
That's so awesome. Which reminds me of something that I had. It was a painful realization, but it was also a freeing one. Is that whenever we were considering placement for Jude, that there was a chance that he could actually be happy, maybe even happier away from us, and that was a tough, pill to swallow. But it was one that I had to consider. It's something that I want for all my children. You don't want all of your kids to live with you forever. You want eventually them to fly from the nest and go start their own families and their lives. And it's interesting that we don't apply that. And I say it's interesting. It's natural that we wouldn't apply that to our special needs children because they do need us so much. And there's this wanting to protect them. And it's way more difficult to release a child with such intense needs. But it's incredible that we live in a society that actually gives them wings to be able to fly from the coop. Whereas before we didn't have that opportunity for them. That was not a probable dream at all for them. It wasn't even on the table. So, and that's what I try to encourage parents about when they're so incredibly devastated about just beginning the conversation about residential care, is that there is a possibility that your child could actually be happy or happier outside of your home. And you really don't want the alternative. When Jude first went to the SSLC, he did not act like he wanted to come home, and that really bothered me. I thought, do you even love us? Do you remember us? It was so devastating for me. And then, of course, I think the light switch just kind of went off like about, gosh, I don't know, maybe like 10 months in. And then he realized, okay, I'm not here short term. Like, I want to go back home. And that's when he started asking for home and crying and stuff. And John and I have said this often. We just thought that the first scenario was hard. The second scenario is much harder when they want to come home and they're not happy away. And that is a possibility. And, I wish I had the happy, Lily Pearl story, but everybody's story is different. And like you said, bottom line, God is faithful in every scenario, in each of our children's stories, no matter what the outcome, no matter how it fleshes out. Like, God is the common theme in every scenario, is that God is still faithful in all of it. And we have seen beauty from it. We've seen purpose. But even if I go to my grave never really having that aha moment, oh, that's why all this happened, I can just rest knowing that God is still good, and God is always working for my good. He has a much better understanding of eternity. Suffering is finite. We can get through anything, and just ask that He'll open my eyes to His faithfulness along the way. And I see that in you, Lorraine. I see that God is definitely, you have been open to see God's faithfulness through it all, and you still have joy. And I would think that a lot of people who are going to listen to this are going to be scratching their heads saying, how is she still smiling? How does she look so beautiful? How does she have that joy on her face? And I know you and I both would just say it's the joy of the Lord, and He gives us our strength to keep going and to preserve our hope. I think that you have, you pretty much have the whole spectrum of scenarios in your home, and it makes you a very well-rounded person. It makes you a very empathetic person, and I see God's refinement in your life, and I see that He has really shaped you, and your story is just so incredibly inspiring to me. How is Connor doing now? Is he happy where he is? Are you able to communicate with him? I know he's kind of limited in his ability to communicate.
Yes. Connor is doing great.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I know I do have such deep empathy for you with Jude wanting to be home. And that struggle, like I cannot even imagine the depth of the heartache of this is what he's asking for, and yet you still can't provide it. And that mother's love and being so torn of, yes, you wish you had a happier kind of ending or outcome or story or the beginning of the next story, you know, of it being happier and tied with a pretty bow on top that makes sense, and that the heartache and struggle in your heart is replaced with pure peace because you see that he is happy and thriving. And I think that the struggle with that is so great that I don't think that a lot of people can really understand until you're walking it. And I empathize greatly with you because even our Connor story, it has a different kind of ending or beginning than what you're currently experiencing with Jude, because Jude is still wanting to come home. Connor does not want to come home. So initially, I was kind of shocked because I was like, he and I are really, really close and very bonded. And initially, I would ask him, you know, so Connor is non-speaking and he does use a little bit of sign language. He understands, his receptive language is very high. So I can ask him questions if I can ask them in a way that he can answer them back to me. So anything that I can word in a way that he can say yes or no. He can nod his head yes, he can nod his head no. He understands what I'm asking. And so initially when he first moved there, I would say, "Are you happy?" And he would say yes. And I would say, "Are you hurting?" Because he has a lot of pain with his medical needs. "Are you hurting?" And if he was in pain, he would say yes. And if he wasn't, he would say no. I would say, like, "Are your needs being met?" Yes. "Are the nurses taking good care of you?" Yes. "Do you want to come home?" No. Every time. He has never said yes to "Do you want to come home?"
Oh my goodness.
But what I see for Connor is that his needs are met so much greater than they ever were at home because he had exhausted mom day and night and irritable mom when he would have a behavior and cause something to be much more complicated than it would have been without the behavior. Um, and at the facility, he's getting these fresh caregivers who come in who are just ready to go. And he's never feeling, well, at least I don't think he's ever feeling like he's a burden to anyone. And I hope he didn't ever feel like he was a burden to me, but I can't help but think that just in all the circumstances that he was able to recognize, mom's exhausted. And there were times that he would be very helpful with me, very, very few times. But it was like in my most exhausted states, he might pick something up that he threw and hand it to me, knowing like I just caused more exhaustion to my mom. He's very aware of those social cues. Does he choose the impulse control to like react well to those social cues? Not usually, but he's very socially aware. So I feel like every time I did get cameras installed in his room and had to go through the process with the state to get that approved because I just wanted to be able to check on him and see when I'm not there, does he appear to be happy and well taken care of? I have been very blessed by those cameras. I get on just occasionally whenever, you know, and look. And I know that there is a sign that says that there are cameras in his room. So whoever goes in there knows that there are cameras. So I have no idea if they act like this all the time, but they love my child well. They're playing with him, they're interacting with him, they're listening to him, they're encouraging him. They know what he's saying. He loves to go outside. And so he uses his finger and he points. He's in a wheelchair. So he points toward the door that he wants to go outside. And they know what he's asking for. And most of the time the answer is yes. And he's getting to go on these wheelchair walks. Most of the day he's outside. That's his favorite place to be. And the caregivers are trying to make sure that his rights are heard because he has a voice. And if they're saying no, they might be denying him of his right to ask for something if it's appropriate. And so my husband has said he's so spoiled there because everyone just does whatever he says.
Yes.
He has like little kind of crinkly toys that he likes to hold. And he'll sit there with his crinkly toy, pick it up, drop it, and then sign help and like point to the caregiver to pick it up and hand it back to him. I'll be like, oh my goodness.
And they do it.
And they love him. And that, I think a little bit of a difference for Connor where he's at is because he is the only minor. Mm-hmm. He's like a child.
Yeah.
Like the staff. They adore him. So like people come from all over that facility to come and just say hi to him, even though he's going to hit them, kick them, headbutt them. They do it anyway. And everybody really loves him because he's young and he's energetic and he's very different than a lot of the population. He is on the nursing floor and it's mainly older and elderly. So as far as his peer group goes, there's nobody even close in age to him. But Connor doesn't care about that because Connor's always just interacted with whoever's taking care of him.
Right.
And, he's never had friends because friends don't want to be hit, kicked, and headbutted. He's never had peers who enjoyed his presence. Mm-hmm. And so for him, he now has all these adults who actually enjoy his presence, even though his presence comes with aggression and abuse. So we feel like Matt said, like God gave us his best with this scenario for Connor. Connor is thriving there, and it gives our hearts so much joy and peace to see that, and that's why I feel like I am deeply empathetic to your situation because not everybody has that outcome.
Yeah,
and it's hard to reconcile that. It's much easier when there's a bow tied on top, and it just gives you kind of this outward visualization of the joy and the peace through all of this. And when you don't have that, you have to seek your joy and peace from the Lord. It's the only place that you're going to get that. And I wish that more people who follow your story could really fathom the deep heartache you have in this. You're not happy about this, but you still have joy from the Lord because of his faithfulness. Yeah. And that's the only place that can really come from, especially when you don't get the bow tied on top with the smiley face of, oh, this is such a great outcome. No, it's not.
Yeah.
And it's not what he desires, but God is still sovereign over the circumstances. And for whatever reason, the reunification has not happened, and it may not happen in your home, for you and Jude. But having to trust in God's sovereignty over it.
Yeah. And I see that played out in your life because those closed doors that were so devastating to you guys opened up the right door, because isn't San Antonio like the closest in proximity to you guys?
It is.
So, yeah. I mean, it's like man, God always gives us his best. Even when we think we're just getting, the scraps on the floor, God does not forget his people. And even when it's ongoing and you don't think your heart can take any more, he comes through. And it's our job to persevere. Persevere has been my word for the last several months. I'm a caretaker in several ways. Lots of kids. My mom lives with us. And I deal with a lot of exhaustion, but the Lord has just told me, persevere, like get up another day and do it and trust me and believe that he's never ever giving me scraps ever. Like he's always giving me his best. And that takes eyes of faith to see, especially if you get on social media and you compare, triggers for me are seeing Jude's peers pop up. This is going to be a big one this year. This is when all his peers are turning 16. They're all getting their licenses,
Mm-hmm.
But keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith. My faith is not yet perfect, but that perseverance, as we're told in Scripture, it produces character. And then character produces hope, and hope does not disappoint. So they all depend on the next thing. So if I want to have preserved hope, if I want to have character, then I have to persevere. I can't stop. And this is how we persevere. We meet people that are persevering, and we find strength. Seeing other people walk in similar paths and not running their car off the side of the road. Like they're still going, they're still laughing, there's still joy. And you are that for me. And I'm just so grateful to have you in my life. But is there any last thing that you would like to leave for people that are listening? We have all kinds of people that listen to this podcast. What would you like to leave with them today?
Oh, goodness.
And you don't have to. If nothing pops into your head, no pressure.
Yeah,
just any final words.
There's such a wide variety of people that listen to it. It's hard to kind of sum up for a variety of populations,
Yeah.
kind of giving a summary. But I think that for me, it's like that judgment that people want to freely share. I feel like it's just unnecessary and hurtful. And when people don't understand, it's easy to cast judgment. And I am grateful to you, Lainey, for persevering through that, because you are criticized in so many different ways for sharing your story, and that you persevere through that, and you choose not to shut down and not close it off for fear of that criticism. You being open to sharing your story and your journey has helped a lot of people who you may never even know. But I think for listeners that there are so many more people experiencing, I guess, just challenges with their children who have intellectual disabilities, autism, behaviors. I think there's such a wide variety of disabilities, and they're not all pretty. They're not all what media can play out as really something to celebrate. Sometimes those disabilities are so severe that it's caused such disruption, such as with Jude's case or Connor's case, that it doesn't feel like celebration. And I wish that people would be able to really step out of their own shoes. And I know it's hard. It's pretty much impossible if you haven't lived it, because I would probably be in that category of people casting judgment if I hadn't been in those shoes myself. But that I'm just super grateful that you've chosen to persevere through it, because I think the number of people who never comment on any of your stuff, who are impacted greatly by what you share, I think that there are probably very large numbers of people who aren't even comfortable leaving a comment for fear that someone's going to judge them. and that because you're willing to take the risk to share your story, that behind the scenes, you are providing hope and encouragement to people who may not have it from any other place. Because I think there are too many people who have no one in their lives to support them in a really hard circumstance with their child. And they do feel alone. And without your presence, they may be left to feel alone and unsupported. But with your presence, there's at least one person out there, you, who's sharing a similar story. And in that one story being shared, they feel like they're not alone, even just with one person. And you may not ever hear from, thousands of people who feel that way about your story. It's easy for those who are casting judgment to fire the darts at you, which is exactly what Satan wants. And he wants to shut you down because you are spreading God's light on situations that are hard, and you're sharing God's truth, and you're sharing it for God's glory and to help other people not feel alone. And Satan wants to shut that down. So I just am grateful that you're willing to take that risk and continue to share, because I think that there are countless people out there who are helped by you. And so I thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. I need to hear from people like you because it is hard. The negativity always speaks louder. I am getting better though at going block, delete, whatever. Before I had a very open mind, like, well, but these are the people that need to hear, and I should let them stay, let them watch. Maybe God will change their hearts. And now I'm like, that's the Lord's responsibility. I don't need that in my life, and I'll just block. But it reminds me why I started doing, as you were speaking, why I started doing what I was doing in the first place. Because I forget, honestly, now that Jude lives in a facility, because life has somewhat gotten to a new normal that is a little bit closer to other people's normal. Like we can do so much more now that he's there 5 days a week. We can have some normalcy. But if I go back in my mind, 5 years ago, and how on the outside I felt, even in the special needs community, when you were saying that Connor didn't have any friends, one of the hardest things for me to watch on the internet was these really precious, like special needs kids in high school who were getting asked to homecoming, who were being labeled, prom king, a queen, with Down syndrome, higher functioning people. I don't know if you've ever watched the series Autism in Love or something like that. It's about people with, and there's this precious guy. I think his name is Connor. Anyway, Tanner. Tanner, his name's Tanner. And he's so precious. He has autism. And he's just like a teddy bear, and everybody loved him. And he was popular in his own way, and people surrounded him. Jude never had that. A lot of his peers didn't even know his name. They didn't even know who he was. That was so incredibly painful for me. Jude was never going to get invited to go to a social event. Jude was not invited to birthday parties. He wasn't that cute kid with Down syndrome that was very socialized and people loved to invite places. And I felt even an outsider within the special needs community. I would seek for community on Instagram, and pretty much everything I was seeing was words of acceptance, stories of, accept them the way that they are, or inspirational stories, or progress. I wasn't seeing a mom talking about how scared she was of her child. I wasn't seeing a mom talk about, I'm afraid that my son may not be able to live here much longer, and how am I going to do this? Or my husband's covered in marks. We're not happy. we don't know how to live with our child. I never saw any of that. And I felt so alone. Even I would see like special needs camps or facilities, and in the early stages of calling around trying to find out if there were options for him, it was always a no. So even in that world of this is supposed to be inclusive, this is supposed to be accommodating, we were having doors shut in our faces. Even at the public school, I mean, Jude had his own classroom away from his self-contained classroom.
Yeah.
Special needs ministries at churches were not able to handle him. And that is what started me wanting to those are the people that I was looking for when I started hashtagging and I started creating content. I wanted to find those people. For me, I wanted to find those people. And then for them, I wanted them to know that we existed. And we found them. And it's been wonderful. And I have a host of moms on my team now. Moms that I didn't even know existed. And now I don't feel alone. And so thank you for reminding me of that, of why I do what I do, because it's so beyond, like, our content is so beyond awareness. I'm not even trying to bring awareness. I'm looking for this niche group of people who have very challenging children who may not be able to stay in the home, and they're looking for supports, and they're not finding them. And I want to connect people with resources, with other people in their state where they can not take no for an answer. And that brings me back to that I want to point out, if you had not been a go-getter and you were turned down by 3 SSLCs, you would still be in the same situation you're in now, and Connor would not be thriving. And that's something that I want to bring up to people listening is don't take no for an answer. It doesn't mean that you're going to get everything you want, but you keep calling and you keep digging and you keep knocking on doors until you finally get what your child needs, even if you've been told no 100 times. I remember when the LIDA magically came up with this idea during COVID. Well, we have a crisis team we can have you talk to. And I'm thinking, I've been in crisis for 10 years and y'all are just now bringing them up. Like, I've been calling, asking them, what do we do? We need help. We need in-home help. And that was interesting to me that was never brought up until that point. So maybe places you've called that have said no, maybe you need to call them again. Maybe a different person gets on the phone and they may not have something for you there, but they can say, you know what? I met somebody at a conference down in wherever. Here's their phone number. Give them a call. Keep calling until you get help. Don't give up. Don't give up. But it does take so much persistence. Persistence, even when you were up against the state. The state, and that feels like, well, if the state says no.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? I'm just little old me, but any entity, any structure or fortified, building cannot stand up against a mother's force, a mother's love. That mama bear, she will get things done for her child, and I've seen it happen. Oh my gosh, time and time and time again. But I wanted to remind our listeners of that, is you have to have grit. You have to have you've got to have persistence, and you're going to fall on the ground and you're going to be like, I can't anymore. There's no hope for me. We're just castaways. Nobody cares about us. And then you're going to shake that off. You're going to sob. You're going to cry. And then you're going to wipe the tears off your face. And you're going to get up and you're going to make another phone call. Or you're going to go join my support group, the RPSN on Facebook, which is the Residential Placement Support Network. And you're going to get on there and you're going to check on there and see if anybody can help. Things like that. You keep searching hashtags until you finally find the right people. Because it's all about people. That's what I've learned. It's not about systems. Systems are always going to fail us. It's about people. Because that whole situation got resolved for you because there was a person named Scott who I had met, and Scott knew a person down in San Antonio, and apparently they had a conversation, and then boom, the door was opened. It's all about people. So you have to meet people, keep meeting people, keep strengthening and developing your network of people. I mean, there is so much power in that. And not to put all the credit on networking and our self-efforts. Ultimately, the Lord opens those closed doors for us. But that was one thing I wanted to say. And then the last thing I want to leave people with, I saw this the other day as I was scrolling. A few followers does not mean no influence. Great influence can happen with just a few people. We don't have to have all these people on our side. We don't have to have these huge numbers on social media to make a huge impact. If you and I can live our lives by affecting, well, you're 12. I mean, gosh, what an impact. You think about Jesus, 12 men, and how the world was never the same again. And to not think that if our work is even just devoted to one child, the child that God's given us that is just really keeping us up at night, like you're leaving a huge impact. Even people as they watch you don't even realize how many people you're impacting with that. Well, thank you so much for coming, and thanks for giving me your time. I know it's precious. You're so amazing, and our God is amazing, and I just am so grateful to, call you friend. I hope I can be as faithful as you've been, you and your husband both. So, but God bless you, and can't wait to see the just continued fruit in your life as you continue to serve the Lord.
Thank you, Lainey. Thank you.
You're welcome.